Good morning.
It's really quiet in here.
Good morning.
We haven't started partying until you came.
It didn't start until you're here.
So I've got the Zoom connected through the computer up there and the audio's there.
Okay.
So they can hear the room, and then whoever wants to share their screen, it should show up there. The camera's from there, so they're seeing the back side of everybody, or the customer. So if you want to turn on, if you want to join the Zoom, so they can see your face, that might be best.
I'll
But don't join audio.
Yeah, the best way.
Yeah, keep your audio.
In front of you. That's the easiest way.
And then once you join, Teddy, I'll make you host, and then I'll.
Okay. And apologies for the slight delay. That's what happens when you're in transition in person, you know. Click the button and switch over.
All right. Micah, you're confirmed? And then someone online, virtually, can you unmute and just make sure the audio is coming through correctly?
Sure. Hi.
Good morning.
Is that loud enough? That's loud enough? Awesome.
Good to see you.
We're not. See this. Not yet.
All right.
Be back up.
I'm ready for it.
This whole hybrid thing.
Somebody perfects it.
That's the model.
And then you'll fill out your info.
Sure.
Just a phone, I think. And maybe an email. And then I'll get an email to confirm. Scott is here.
Okay, we're gonna last few things here, and then we'll get started. In the meantime, Carol, I think you're on, or Diane, do we want to do a roll call?
Sure. We'll do it right now.
Perfect.
Okay. Eddie Kelly.
Here.
Kelly here. Caribou, or Yvonne Caribou.
I'm here.
Caribou here. Nolan Coffin. Steve Fensky.
Hello.
Fensky here. Steve Georgie. Georgie here. Jason Hollanday. Hollanday here. Mark Johnson.
Good morning here.
Johnson here. Brian Crambier.
Good morning, I'm here.
Crambier here. Micah Myers.
I'm here.
Myers here. Phil Stahlberger. Sorry. Phil?
He said he was going to be in and out today.
Okay. Teresa Sunday.
I'm here.
Sunday here. Jim Wycombe.
Here.
Wycombe here. Paul Wirtz.
Good morning.
Wirtz here. Dave Wolf.
Good morning.
Wolf here.
Okay. Thank you, Carol. So just a quick review of the agenda for today. We'll start out, we'll approve the meeting minutes here in a second, and then we'll have an update from the NTIA grant and the role of the task force in preparation for that. So Tom Karst is here with us today, and glad that he's here. And I think we'll have good, lively discussion on that piece. From that, we'll have effective broadband grants and business and townships. Pete Johnson will be online to be able to go through that with us. We'll take a break around 11. Get there. And then after the break, we'll come back and it'll just be an update from the subgroups, both on the affordability and adoption, and then the funding mapping and usage as well. And then we'll end with a few remarks and just other business that we need to discuss or have a conversation about and whatnot. So that should take us right about noon or a little after noon. It's great to have everybody sort of, this is truly hybrid, so we have half of the task force online and half of the task force in person. So great, but great to see everybody who's in the room here as well. So with that, let's start out with the meeting minutes approvals. Those were included in the agenda or in the meeting invite. Any comments or questions about the meeting minutes? All right, not hearing any in the room. I'm not seeing any hands go up online. So we will consider the meeting minutes approved. Okay, so with that, let's start with our first presentation on NTIA. So Tom, I will turn it over to you.
Queued up in the session.
Yeah, you can be up here or there. It's up to you.
Here. Plug in.
Okay.
Well, if you want to just join the Zoom,
You can just join the Zoom if you want, and then.
Of course, my computer won't accept that.
Oh, I got you.
protected you.
Oh, gotcha.
So you got it on the thumb drive.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's okay. You're not good with that.
That works. Bring the PowerPoint screen share.
No worries, I can see that. Both of them or just one?
Yeah, both.
Presentation do you want first?
Oh, just this one.
This one's good?
Yep. All right, good morning all. So I'm Tom Karst. I'm with the U.S. Department of Commerce, National Telecommunications and Information Administration as the Federal Program Officer dedicated to and based in Minnesota for the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment or BEAD program as a part of the Internet for All initiative. I'm going to give a brief overview of the BEAD program, the digital equity program, and then the role that this task force, as well as all of you as individuals, can play. The most succinct summation of BEAD is we're mandated with getting high-speed internet access to 100% of Minnesotans. Not 98, not 99, but 100. All of us here today know that that is going to be an incredible challenge. To that end, my role here is threefold. First, I'm here to help. We know the task force is going to be complex and challenging. I'm here as a resource, and so are a litany of federal experts that can be brought in as necessary. Second, engagement. If we're going to reach 100% of Minnesotans, we need to reach 100% of Minnesotans. Hear their needs, listen to their challenges, understand their lives, the dreams that they have for themselves and their families. We need to listen and engage. We have a finite amount of time, resources, and people. I'm here to help. If you have conferences, panels, town halls, county meetings, tribal meetings, I'm here. Let me know. Bring me in if you want me to speak, be on a panel, or just listen. Bring me on in. Third, once the money's flowing, projects are moving, paperwork and compliance, the boring stuff. But before we dive into BEAD, we need to acknowledge some of the realities of broadband in Minnesota. The Minnesota Broadband Office is one of the most well-established and arguably has had more experience in successfully deploying broadband grant programs than any other state. The Border to Border program has funded 78 projects with $47 million in public funds and another $68 million brought in as private match. It's reached 20,000 of the most challenging locations that this state has to offer, and there's more in the queue. Next, the priority of bringing broadband connectivity to Minnesota has been extended administrations, has been an across the aisle, cross-cultural, and cross-geographic point of unity. And we have you. This task force represents local and national internet service providers, electric co-ops, the technicians and network engineers, those who actually do the deployments, tribal nations, townships, densely populated rural areas, low density rural areas, the urban and the suburban, libraries and schools, and the past, present, and future of agriculture. All right, BEAD. This is a $42 billion program to get all Americans connected to high-speed internet, starting with the unserved, those without access to 20x3, then the underserved, those without access to 100 by 20, getting gig by gig to community anchor institutions, and weaving digital equity, digital skills, and adoption programs throughout. Okay, big questions. How much money are we getting, and when? Short answer on money is we don't know yet, but there is a formula based on the number of unserved locations adjusted against the national counts. These are going to be derived from mapping data submitted by states, counties, cities, ISPs, and eventually individuals to the FCC. Right now, the FCC is accepting challenges to its fabric map. It marks the broadband serviceable locations, houses, apartments, offices, community anchor institutions, generally speaking, dwellings and places that people gather that do, could, or should have access to high-speed internet. Next, they mark up those who do and do not have qualifying internet access, which is going to give us our count of the un- and underserved. All right, the timeline. The Minnesota Office of Broadband Development has already submitted its application for a BEAD planning grant. Once that's awarded, we're going to have 270 days or 9 months to put together a 5-year plan to connect all Minnesota. In parallel to that, the FCC is going to continue developing their maps to count those un- and underserved. And then when NTIA has decided what they're going to cut for the allocations, we're going to have 180 days or 6 months to put together the initial proposal, which is basically a financially informed version of that 5-year plan. When the initial proposal gets approved, it releases 20% of those funds allocated to create a final proposal, and if Minnesota so chooses, kick off a few projects at the same time. When the final proposal gets approved, that releases the remainder of the funds. So I know for some of you, that sounds like a nice amount of time. For others, hearing those dates is already putting you in a panic, which is understandable. Not surprisingly, if we're going to meet this mandate, we're going to need a pretty comprehensive plan. Again, the Minnesota Office of Broadband Development has already put in their application for $5 million in BEAD planning funds. It's your standard research, capacity building, development of technical assistance programs, etc. The piece I want to highlight here today is local coordination and community engagement. Again, if we're going to reach all of the underserved, first we need to reach them. We need to engage and understand their lives, their barriers, their wants, and their challenges. It's going to mean going out to these hard-to-reach communities and understanding them, finding their leaders who want to be problem solvers, and bringing them into the fold for Internet for All. If people don't have access to high-speed Internet, they can't access it, period. If that access isn't affordable, it's not going to get used. They're not going to become subscribers. If they have affordable access, but they don't have the equipment and digital skills to adopt it into their lives, they're not going to. If that affordable access that's been adopted doesn't bring the resources and the opportunities to meaningfully advance their lives, we will have missed one of the biggest opportunities in our and their lifetimes. Which brings us to digital equity. Of the $2.75 billion allocated to this program, Minnesota is going to be getting around $900,000 to put together a digital equity plan, and then an extra allocation to actually implement it. One of the most recurring questions I get when I give my digital equity spiel is, what does that actually mean? And what are the tangibles behind it? We need to kind of start with what broadband is, right? It's a tool. It has no inherent impact value by itself. Right? What matters is how it's used. I always like to bring into the comparison of electricity, right? We go back to 200, 400 AD during the Sasanian Empire. Right? We found big clay pots with layers of metal rods. You throw an acidic liquid in there, and it generates electricity. We don't know what it was used for, but we do know that electricity didn't come to the forefront again until the mid-1800s. And although it was getting more well harnessed, it was used primarily for theater tricks, entertainment, exhibitions. Right? It wasn't until Michael Faraday, the discovery of electromagnetism, the development of the electric motor, that kicked off an industrial revolution that created more progress in the preceding 200 years than it had in the last 2000s. What mattered was how it was brought into our lives. And that's what made it ubiquitous into everything that we do. It's the same deal with broadband. What matters is how people are going to use it. For the unconnected, COVID was a harsh and shocking presentation of what they were missing out on. Right? When they went to go get it, when they knew what they needed, far too many of them couldn't. We also know that many of those who could get it couldn't afford it. The key to broadband for them was remote education, remote work, telehealth, connecting with their friends, their families, their communities. Right? All of those little life pieces that high-speed internet has been integrated to. And that's what digital equity really boils down to, right? The ability to make use of life, of opportunity, and participation in this digital age. So those are what those tangibles are, right? Those little life pieces that impacts, that it is a part of. Okay, great. So what do Minnesota's tangibles need to be? Well, I can give you some good news on that. The federal government is not going to tell you what they are. Right? Minnesota gets to design its own vision, its own objectives, its own metrics, its own barriers, solutions, and figure out how it's going to make this work and how it's going to weave digital equity into the BEAD program. So just like BEAD, Minnesota's already put in their digital equity planning application. After it's awarded, they're going to have a year to put together a plan, a year to make awards, and then the remaining bit of the BEAD timeline to implement everything, and again, weave it into the deployment aspects of BEAD. This is an opportunity to holistically embed equity into the projects that we are going to be mandated to be completed. Successful infrastructure deployment requires that all communities can meaningfully use and adopt broadband into their lives, particularly the lives of those who have historically been excluded from access. For BEAD, right, local coordination and community engagement is not only necessary for success, it's statutorily required. Same deal for digital equity. The funding statute has defined some targeted populations that have historically been affected by digital inequity, and these are the populations that must be a part of the digital equity plan. But this is a starting list. This is not an endpoint to just check things off. All of these populations must be included, but Minnesota gets to choose who else they add to it. Who else is important in our communities that we need to make sure are included. So what does this actually look like, right? How can you weave digital equity and BEAD together? So we'll start with one of the kind of standard examples, right? Workforce development. As I've been going around talking to the various ISPs, small, medium, large, new, old, one of the most recurring challenges that they say they're going to have in actually completing this work is having the people to do it. When you go and talk to these and underserved communities, one of the most challenging pieces they bring up about their lives are access to well-paying and accessible jobs. The ISPs are going to need people to engineer, deploy, and maintain their infrastructure. So if you're going to do this in a remote area where you're not necessarily going to have a office, a base of operations, why not have the people in that area be the ones trained and hired to do the deployments, the maintenance, right? Make them a part of it and make the broadband a part of their lives. If you want an easy way to get people to be long-term subscribers, have them help build the network, make it personal to them. You want to do ongoing maintenance? Have them there, train them in, so you don't have to send somebody out however many miles, spending how much gas, how much time, et cetera, to make it continue to run. The people of these communities, if they're going to be a part of it, they're going to be essential to be a part of it. It means all of us need to go and talk, listen, discuss, learn what workforce development is going to be most important to them and how we all can make it a part of their lives and a part of our programs. Which brings us back to those barriers to adoption. Understanding what's stopping people right now. Right? We know access is always an issue. We know affordability is always an issue, but so is relevancy. If people don't feel that spending this extra money per month, spending this extra money on equipment, spending the time to learn the skills to use it, if they don't feel that it's going to be relevant to their lives, they're not going to do it. That's a piece that we need to talk to them to understand how we can make it relevant to them. So how do we do that? Probably not surprisingly, it's going to be engagement. 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 All right, so what about all of you, right? What is the role that this task force can play in all of this? Well, let's start at the beginning. There is no federal mandate that you must have a task force, which means the federal government is not going to be defining your role. That's going to be defined by the Minnesota Office of Broadband Development, which means what I can share not are some hard must-dos, but some kind of insights and concepts from experience and best practices from past programs. One, coordinate with the office, right? Yes, I'm here to help. You're here to help. They're the ones doing the heavy lifts. They're going to be shouldering the majority of this burden as we put these plans together. Coordinate with them, support them in their efforts, be a resource. Right? The only way we're going to do this is if we do it together. All right, number two, engage. Surprise, surprise. We need to spread awareness of the program, find the community leaders who want to make change, and how we can figure out how we can make them a part of the solution. Three, help with coalition building. And four, work together, right? We need to be organized and be able to amplify. So helping the broadband office, right? Share your advice and your expertise. You all know the staff that they have. Their institutional knowledge is valuable beyond measure for as long as they've been in this program and as long as they've been doing the work. Your experience, expertise, the people you can bring to the table, the conversations you can have are also going to be essential to all of this. We have a lot to do in a short amount of time and a state full of people to impact. The only way we're going to do this is if we do it together. Engagement, right? I've talked about this a lot already, I know. If we don't know, we don't know. The word needs to be spread. People need to know that this is happening and to know that they get to weigh in a meaningful way. Right? These engagements aren't just, yep, check the box. I talked to these people. Yep, check the box. I talked to this town. We need to listen to them, understand what they're saying, put together some reports for every person we meet, every community we talk to, so that we can get those organized and figure out how we can address their challenges. One of the other pieces we need to make sure that we address is there's no universal solution, right? What's going to work for one community is what's going to work for one community. There are different needs and resources from Fond du Lac and Bois Forts, right? Bemidji and Brainerd, Waseca to Winona, Thief River Falls and Taylor's Falls, right? They're all going to be different, and they all need to be addressed as personal entities. Coalition building, right? Minnesota already has a range of trade associations, working groups, task force, workshops. We have a lot of this already. What we don't have is as much of it coalesced as could be possible. So what I've seen as impactful in the past is finding ways to unite the seemingly disparate. There's always going to be conflicting interests. There's always going to be people who have conflicting ideas and need conflicting things. And we can't be all things to all people at all times. But when we can bring folks together, we can find how they can be supportive to each other, right? Even when they disagree, even when they find that their interests are in conflict, we can find common ground to unite them, right? Which brings us to, right, that working together, organizing, and amplifying. I can give you one little example of one way we could do this. Right? Next Gen 911. It can use the FCC fabric data to inform its locations within my space. Right now, a lot of states are doing the opposite. Right? They're using their E911 data to inform their FCC fabric challenges. If you're going to set up a Next Gen 911 network, it's going to need a broadband backbone. If you have a broadband backbone, it can be used for direct-to-home service. It can be used to running the municipal connections, and it can be brought to your community anchor institutions, your schools, your libraries. If you're bringing those connections, they can not only provide their own programs out to their community, they can bring in programs that already exist out in the world and in the country, right? Find those pieces that already work, tweak them, tailor them to fit the community. When you're providing those programs, you can include workforce development, right? If you're going to train the people to do the work in their community, it's nice to not have to build it from the ground up. Bring in those programs, but first you need the connection to do so. You need to understand the interest. You need to understand what's going to work best for them. When you do all of that, not only can they install the fiber, the fixed wireless, whatever technology is the best fit for them and their area, and for whatever comes next. This is not going to be a one shot. The way that we need to look at these programs is figuring out how we can make them sustainable for the future, even once this federal funding is gone. If you just run one network, train the person to deploy it, and a list, right, that's not sustainable. So there needs to be creative solutions to keep funding in, to keep technology moving forward, and to subsist these programs after the money runs out. The key with all of this is it impacts so much of every piece of life. We're going to have complementary needs, complementary resources, complementary programs that can be combined and leveraged to amplify each other. Right? If you have funding for one program that builds on top of another, right, that builds on top of another, that builds on top of another, you can stretch those resources. Right? We have an unlimited potential impact of broadband with finite funding, finite time, finite people, and a government mandate. We need to find these programs, organize them, leverage them. So work with your broadband office, engage, work on coalition building, and help find programs that can be united and amplified. This is going to be a complex, complicated, and heck of a challenge. And it's an opportunity. And for many of you, another opportunity to impact the lives of every current and future Minnesotan. And that broader world that the people from this state always seem to go out into and make better. It's not just us. When we weave this web and create this impact here, Minnesotans love to go out in the world and work on it and improve it. So we get to expand what our state does by getting this done first. If you can't tell, I am deeply looking forward to working with all of you on this and walking this complicated, complex, but ultimately what's going to be a fantastic road. And I'll open up the floor.
Thank you, Tom. Great presentation. Questions from the folks in the room or anybody online? Or comments?
I guess the comment I would have, we were joking earlier, the longest serving broadband task now officially member, is the process you described leading up to, where we would actually start awarding grants and things, the stakeholder engagement. We've covered a lot of that ground already. I mean, going back to before this was even an Office of Broadband, working with Blandon, is there any way to kind of like capture a lot of that to kind of jumpstart, maybe jump ahead in that engagement, or kind of, maybe move through the engagement and get to, the mapping and deployment, just accelerate getting our share?
Yes, with an asterisk. So absolutely, right? Use that knowledge, those resources, those reports, because you've been doing this a long time, right? You have that information. So start with that, but make sure it's up to date, right? Make sure that you're going, hey, you said this 5 years ago. How have things changed? How have things progressed? and see what you need to tweak, what needs to be added. And the other piece to keep in mind is these things can be done in parallel, right? You don't have to do community engagement first, mapping second, digital equity third, deployment fourth. All of them can and should be kind of layered and interwoven and happening at the same time. So use what you got, update it, and don't worry about step by step. You kind of work on making it happen all at the same time, as much as possible.
Is there any early estimate of what Minnesota will get beyond the 100 million?
That's not something I can weigh in on.
So, but as far as the 100 million plus whatever comes from the data fabric, right? Once that gets awarded to Minnesota, it doesn't, it gets straight through the process where it gets awarded to whoever applies to Office of Broadband Development, or does it have to go through legislature? I mean, there's a whole process for that.
So on the federal side,
Yeah.
all I can really say is that we have to make sure that whatever program it runs through, I believe early discussions are about running it through the existing border-to-border program. As long as that program is in compliance with all the federal regulations, requirements, blah, blah, blah. Yes. But a lot of that's going to be up to Minnesota.
Okay.
So as long as it's in compliance, they can run it through whatever program they feel is going to be the best fit.
So it doesn't have to go through any approval, right? As long as it meets the criteria and there's nothing stopping.
Yeah, and that'll be one of those pieces that, surprise, surprise, I'm here to help with. Right? As we're developing this, as we're understanding it, I will be bringing in kind of, our medley of attorneys to make sure that everything is in compliance, that it runs smooth, and that we don't have, hey, final proposal's done, here's your other 80%, oopsie daisy. Right? We're going to make sure we do this along the way.
Tom, from an NTIA perspective, obviously one of the goals is to get 100% of Minnesotans connected, right, for the state of Minnesota. Are there any other, not I want to say targets, but goals that like NTIA wants to see?
So there's what we want to see and what we can measure.
Okay.
What we want to see is all of these digital equity pieces woven throughout. It's the easy thing to measure, the easy thing to mandate, right? It's the deployments. When it comes to how those digital equity pieces are woven in, that's again going to fall to the states. Yes, they will submit the proposal, and NTIA will make sure that it meets kind of whatever needs we see as fit. We make sure that it's integrated. But as much as I get that, what is digital equity? It's going to be harder to define those concepts on our end. It's going to fall much, much more to the state broadband office.
Other questions from Tom? Mark?
Just to be clear, all the funding, whether it be for deployment or for digital equity, will be through the state's planning process and not directly from NTIA. In other words, people are not going to apply to it; they will apply to a state program. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Good.
That's an easy yes. No yes with an answer. That's an easy yes.
For those online, any questions for Tom? Comments?
Yeah, I've got a quick one. Is it, am I understanding it correctly that our measurement of, whether or not we've achieved digital equity goals will be part of what we define in the digital equity plan?
Yes.
But we'll determine the measurement criteria and success criteria.
Yep. And, NTIA is going to give it an overview to make sure that it's working with what we see, that we see that it's part of the BEAD program as well. But yeah, ultimately, Minnesota is to define that.
Are there any, at the federal level, are there any criteria that, the administration is hoping for in terms of digital equity that, you're hoping to feed in from all the different states to be able to report success about this program?
So there's those targeted populations, those, 8 groups that swing back up for you. But those are gonna be the ones that are absolutely required, every single one of them, required to be covered in that plan.
Mm-hmm.
And that's gonna be the first threshold that NTIA looks at, when they're going to approve a digital equity plan, is are these 8 populations addressed? And then there's that more subjective assessment of how is addressing them working with the deployment programs as a part of BEAD.
I guess I'm thinking a little more specifically about measurement. For example, let's take low-income households. At the federal level, are you hoping to see simply that more low-income households are connected, or are you looking for any specific measurements of the impact on the low-income household of having internet access?
We don't have those specifics. We don't have that definition for you. That is up to Minnesota to define.
We're going to define. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Diane put some comments in the chat as well.
And I believe that's the statute for funds going through the.
Is the appropriation from last year's budget, moving some federal money further.
Okay, anything else for Tom? Checking online to make sure there's no hands up or anything like that. Okay, thank you, Tom, really appreciate it, thank you.
Thank you all, looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Excuse me. Back all your devices here. Thank you, sir. Okay, next on the agenda is the effects of broadband grants on businesses and townships. With Pete Johnson. Is Pete on?
Might have Shane.
Okay. Good to see Shane there. Shane, are you there? Let's do this. Why don't we take a 5-minute break while we figure out sort of who's where and all that, and then we'll come back and then see if we need them on. If not, we'll switch the agenda up a little bit and we can start with the subgroup update. Okay, for those of you, you know where the restrooms are, they're right out to the left.